We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Thursday. It's just me, some emails, some news. We're just going to hang out together today. It's just going to be me. And sometimes it's good to do that. Sometimes it kind of brings everything down a level, calms things out, because in these days, there are plenty of things that get us pretty wired up, pretty nervous. And it's important that we keep an even keel, that we don't get too emotional about things. There's a lot of crazy shit out there, a lot of things that we could worry about. But it doesn't do us any good to worry. We've got to focus on those things that will help fix whatever situation we're in. And we're in a number of situations. Of course, we've been dealing with this tariff situation with Donald Trump. Donald Trump imposed 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada, 10% on China. Stock market dropped like a rock, and that made Donald Trump a little nervous, frankly. I thought he was going to back out of the whole thing, and like he did the first time. And he did back out some, but not all of it. Apparently, he cut a deal with automakers, gave them a 30-day reprieve so they wouldn't get tariffs for the next 30 days. You have to wonder what the automakers gave him to do that. Some under the table money, maybe. And think about this. Think of how it benefits the automakers. They've got 30 days to sell cars. And we know that in 30 days, assuming the tariffs take effect, cars will go up from $4,000 to $12,000 a piece. So those people who were thinking about buying cars are going to hurry up and buy cars. Donald Trump scores, the auto industry scores, and the rest, those of us in the consumer part of the equation and everything else, whether we're talking about food or we're talking about fuel or we're talking about any of those things, those prices should be going up because those tariffs are still in effect. There's always some kind of grift, always some kind of game going on with Donald Trump. And each and every time he does something, you can almost be sure that he's going to fuck us over because that's all he does. That's all the Republican Party does. Um, I've said this before and I'll say it again. Donald Trump isn't using tariffs as an economic policy. He couldn't be because it's absolutely ignorant. Everybody who's ever looked at it that's not a Republican has said this is the dumbest idea ever. Donald Trump, this is just part of Donald Trump's ploy, his ploy for negotiations. For a guy who claims to be an expert negotiator, he really only has one strategy to the whole thing. And that's first to try to intimidate somebody into bending to his will. When that doesn't work, he ramps it up and he ramps it up again. If people still keep pushing back, this guy is so insecure that he can't admit that he's wrong. He's playing chicken and he can't admit he's wrong. So he will double down and triple down. He's willing to fail big and then come back and tell you that he's winning big as opposed to doing the right thing. There is no way he gave the 30 days to the automakers without getting something in return. Now, the rest of it, as far as I know, is still intact, and it's still going to have a significant effect on our economy. I mean, it's going to fuck over our economy. And I've said this before in other podcasts that I'm kind of hoping that he does it fully and it crashes hard so we can get this out of the way and get headed back toward the right track of things. Whether that will be the case or not, I don't know. But Donald Trump's strategy is about intimidation. And that's what he did with the tariffs. Nobody with any sense would have told him this is a good idea. He came up with it the first time and then he gave him a 30-day reprieve. He got to the edge and the stock market started to shake a little bit and he pulled back. And then this time around, he did invoke the tariffs and the stock market crashed by 1,300 points. Last time it crashed that hard, believe it or not, was when Donald Trump was president during his first term, right around COVID. So Donald Trump's got the two worst crashes of three. I would presume that the depression was worse than what we've experienced. But anyway, Donald Trump plays these games and he's trying to intimidate people to do what he wants. The trouble is nobody really knows what he wants. I mean, he's going to Canada and said, we've got to stop the fentanyl from coming into the United States. We've got to stop the fentanyl. Well, here's the thing. There's 21,000 pounds a year of fentanyl coming across the Mexican border. Yeah, that's a problem. We should address that and take care of that. And hopefully Donald Trump is in the process of doing that. But he's saying the same thing to Canada, that it's about the fentanyl. 20,000 pounds coming across the southern border and maybe other locations throughout the country, maybe even from the East Coast. You know how much fentanyl in weight is coming across the Canadian border? 43 pounds. 43 pounds, that's it. Donald Trump's not looking to fix anything. He's looking to start a fight, create some chaos, intimidate some people. Unfortunately, for Donald Trump, he's not intimidating anybody in Mexico or Canada. In fact, the Canadians recognize that if these tariffs go into effect, it's going to affect them, certainly. It's going to hurt them, but they're willing to fight and they're willing to push back on America. And make no mistake, if the Canadians do retaliatory tariffs, it's going to sting a lot. I mean, as it is, the Ontario Premier, Doug Ford, has ordered everybody to take all American alcohol off the shelves of liquor stores. It may not sound like a lot to you, but Canada buys more liquor from America than any other country in America. Now you have to wonder, this may or may not concern Donald Trump, but if you go down to Kentucky where Jack Daniels is and some other companies, if Canada stops buying their alcohol, that's a pretty serious thing. That's even more serious than a tariff. A tariff adds money to it, adds cost to it, and presumably people would buy less. What Doug Ford is doing is making it so that nobody can buy any of it. So they're losing all their business, a significant amount of business in Canada. How long will this go before people just start losing their shit? Companies, it's costing them money. It will cost all of us money because we'll pay more. And he's going to do some damage in Canada too, to the businesses, to the government, and to the consumers in Canada as well. And what for? What's the reason for this? All he could ever say is it's because of the fentanyl. But we know that there's only 43 pounds of fentanyl that comes across the border on a yearly basis. There are easier ways, less destructive ways to fix that situation. But that's not Donald Trump. Donald Trump's like a 70s era rock band who goes and stays in the hotel and for the fuck of it, just tears up the hotel. It's frustrating watching the stupidity only because of the damage it does to other people other than Donald Trump. Donald Trump can stand there in his State of the Union and lie after lie after lie, go off on tangents and talk about things that have nothing to do with anything else, go 2 hours, more than 2 hours, almost 2 hours with this speech, the longest State of the Union ever. And this is what they do. It's just a constant waste of time. Then you look out in the audience in that speech, and you see the Democrats sitting there stoically, not clapping, not standing up, obviously driving Donald Trump nuts, and the Republicans just going crazy, standing up and applauding and cheering and yelling, USA, USA. What's troubling about that is these people, the few that are reasonably minded, know what Donald Trump is doing is a joke. It's wrong, it's stupid, and it's damaging to our country. But they are so caught up in their own positions, their own power, their own money, they will go against the country to support Donald Trump. Now, I've said this before. The end will come with Donald Trump. He will crash. They always do. And I'm curious as to what these Republicans are going to do when Donald Trump is finally out of the picture, when he's not in power anymore. Are these people going to deny that they stood with Donald Trump? A little hard to do. It's on fucking videotape and audio tape and in the newspapers. We all know who supports Donald Trump. What are they going to do if they want to continue their careers? Now, some people have told me that, well, they'll just act like they didn't agree with him totally and felt like they had to do it, and they'll go on with their careers. This is a much different situation than siding with a losing politician, because even more than that, there's going to be evidence of the damage done by siding with Donald Trump. We are going to have an economy that's dramatically affected. We are going to have people that have been dramatically affected, companies that maybe go out of business. When Donald Trump's finally out of the way, and assuming the Democrats get an opportunity to start to clean things up, this is going to take a while. This isn't something where the Democrats can take over, snap their fingers, and everything's better. Donald Trump has been incredibly destructive. And once we can wrench away the power from Donald Trump and the Republicans, that's when the work starts. That's when things get really fucking busy. And it's going to take a while. And that's the sad part of this thing. Donald Trump keeps wrecking things with the help of Elon Musk. And it takes him minutes or hours or a couple days to do these things. But when it comes back to some normalcy and that we can try to get things back together, it's literally going to take years and decades. And that's a little frustrating. That's a little upsetting, to say the least. On the show, we do have some emails and we have some news stories that we want to talk about. Let's start out with this one. Hi, Mike. We have to burn down corporate media. The reason why, as you were saying in your email podcast, as it's taking longer than expected for Trump to burn down while he's getting propped up by all the media that's lying, the saying he's doing a great job and everything opposite of reality. You can say something and people say, I never heard that, or I heard the total opposite of my God. Why are people so fucking stupid? Well, that's been my question all along. Corporate media is the reason why Kamala Harris isn't president now. A lot of people didn't even hear her speak at all. And when the Fox News talked about her, they just said how stupid she was and how she loved trans people and blah, 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 stupid shit. Until corporate media is castrated, reformed, or put into bankruptcy, this kind of thing is going to continue. Rhonda from Washington State. Now, I couldn't agree with you more. I think the whole initial presence of Donald Trump and everything we've gone through up to this point, including the division in this country. As you've said, people will hear one story and then other people will hear another story. There is no common ground. It's hard to debate when you don't know the same story. You can have different opinions, but if you don't know the story the other person is telling, there's really nothing to argue about. And I've said this all along. I think the media is as much or more to blame for our position right now than anything. When Donald Trump first decided to run for president, it was kind of a joke. I don't think anybody really believed that he was going to win. And because he was a joke, they just kind of lapped up all the silliness and the ridiculousness that Donald Trump doled out. Every time they put him on TV, it got big ratings, got people talking. So they said, this is great. We're making money on this. Keep him on TV. And by keeping him on TV like that, they gave him some credibility that he didn't have up to that point. And then people started to jump on board. The dumb people, obviously, but people nonetheless jumped on board and decided they were going to vote for him, thought he was a credible candidate. Now, the interesting thing is, when he lost in 2020, I thought that that would be the moment in time where the Republicans would kick him to the curb, see him as a liability, and move forward with somebody else. Of course, that didn't happen. Kevin McCarthy went and embraced him, and the media, they just saw this as a windfall for them because Donald Trump is back. He's going to continue to be a big viewer bonanza for them, and they're going to make a lot of money. And when it came down to it, that's all they cared about. That's all they cared about was that they were making money. It didn't matter if it was damaging the country. It didn't matter if it was hurting people. They were making money, and the bottom line is all they cared about. I heard about something yesterday that I thought was a little disturbing, but not surprising. Um, Shortly after the speech for the State of the Union came out, I think CBS came out with a poll that said 80% of the people in this country thought that speech was positive and 23% thought it was negative. Well, that's a pretty telling poll, isn't it? I mean, that suggests that most of this country believes in Donald Trump and supports everything he's doing and saying. But what they didn't tell you about this poll is that the situation is such that this poll is not your typical poll. I mean, how could you get a poll out that quickly anyway? And the fact of the matter is that about 60% of the people in this poll were Republicans. Well, no, about 70% were Republicans, and 30% were Democrats. So this isn't really a legitimate poll. It's not balanced. It's not fair. It's nothing. But it doesn't matter to them as long as the message gets out there and that dumb people will buy into the bullshit, which is what they did. I agree with you, Rhonda. Thank you very much. All right. Hi, I've heard multiple guests insist that fired feds are ineligible for unemployment because of what was cited on their SF-50 as a reason for termination of employment. That's not true. First, there are 50 states and several territories, and rules differ somewhat. However, poor performance or not meeting expectations are generally not a bar to drawing benefits. Misconduct, on the other hand, could be. These people aren't being accused of misconduct. Well, I like to make sure that's the case, because if they think they can get out of paying unemployment, I wouldn't put it past them. Anyway, goes on to say, the SF-50 paperwork has to list a reason for termination, right or wrong. So that's what they're doing, listing a reason to get the probationary people out the door. That was the first phase of the wholesale destruction of government. Anyone who's fired should file immediately for unemployment. If denied, they should appeal. A hearing will be scheduled. A government rep will have to defend their position. Chances are this will be a no-show and the appeal will succeed. Thanks, Nancy, retired Fed. Well, thank you, Nancy. I stand corrected. And if anybody would know, it would be you. So I defer to you. All right, the next one says, make Ukraine 51st state instead of Canada. Think about it. A cat amongst the pigeons. Chris from London, American and British citizen born in Boston. I'm anything but a MAGA. That's an interesting concept. And you know that Zelensky made an interesting comment. I think I've talked about this before. Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin really want Zelensky to resign or to step away. And there's only one reason they want that. They want that because Zelensky's a strong leader. He can't be pushed around. He's not bending to Donald Trump or Vladimir Putin. They want to get somebody weaker in there that they can control. So people keep asking Zelensky, are you going to resign? Would you resign for peace? And Zelensky had the perfect response. See, Zelensky's got half a brain. He's a smart guy. Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and the rest of these motherfuckers, they are not bright. But Zelensky said this. He said, I would resign from the presidency in Ukraine if Ukraine is allowed to join NATO. Now, this isn't what Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin want to hear, because if that's the case, that makes this whole thing tougher. That makes it so that there are 31 other countries, or about 31 other countries, that would get on board and help Ukraine. As it is, it sounds like Europe is going to get on board and help Ukraine, which only makes sense. If Russia takes over Ukraine and then pushes forward into Poland, this is a distinct risk to Europe. And it's also the beginning of a world war. Donald Trump said Zelensky's gambling with World War III. Well, actually, what Zelensky's doing is trying to avoid World War III. Donald Trump is the one putting it at risk. If you let Vladimir Putin take over Ukraine, then he'll go to Poland. NATO will be involved, and then we have a fucking mess. Any idiot can see this. Any idiot can understand it. Well, any idiot but Donald Trump. All right, this one comes from Ken. It says, is it bad? I was hoping the bloated orange turd would drop dead during his rant or speech. I turned it off as he lied about Social Security. Have you seen the farmers who voted for Trump? They have been totally fucked by Trump because of U.S. aid's destruction. Ken. Well, as Old Soul once said, her grandmother told her, I don't wish anybody's death. I don't wish death on anybody. But I do look forward to reading a few obituaries. And I guess I would answer it that way. I've said that about Donald Trump too. It seems like, we've got the courts, we've got Congress, and nothing is stopping Donald Trump. So as I sit here, I do wish the worst for him, not for the sake of punishment of Donald Trump, for the future and safety of this country. Because I truly believe Donald Trump is absolutely a risk to this country, the democracy. He is an enemy of this country. I believe that anybody that supports Donald Trump is also an enemy of this country. So for any of those people, whether it be Donald Trump, his administration, the Republican Party in Congress, or any of the Trump-le-fuck followers, if something bad happens to you, well, that's a good day for me. I'm going to be smiling like a motherfucker if something happens to you. Whether you lose your business, lose your money, lose your house, or you fall ill, don't come to me looking for sympathy. I'm not that nice a guy. There are bridges too far. And when you try to attack our democracy and ruin our country, and take money away from veterans and elderly folks and children and that sort of thing, there is no going back on that. There's just no going back. I wish you the worst, and I can't wait for it to start to happen. Now, this person was said, hey, Boomer, yes, the Not a Podcast TikTok videos are great. Keep them up. I can't wait until Trump's ass and all the Trump-le-fucks are with him. Keep up the good work, Des. Thank you very much. Yeah, one of the audience suggested I do the TikTok Not a Podcast. I didn't know what else to call it, so I called it Not a Podcast because it's not a podcast. For those of you that don't know, basically what I do is I take the day's TikToks, I take the audio out, I butt them up together, and I put them on Spotify. So if you haven't heard the TikToks or don't have time to wait around for whenever I crop up on the For You page, you can go to Spotify, usually in the afternoon, early evening, and all the TikToks I've done is there in an audio format. Go to Spotify, and you can hear all the TikToks for the day. It's pretty easy. Now, if you want the video version of them, you can also get the TikToks on YouTube as well as the podcast. So be sure to check those out. All right. Hey, Mike, I love your show. Hardly ever miss it. I've emailed you a couple of times. I'm here in the MAGA stronghold of Southern Iowa. My wife and I went to our daughter and son-in-law's home for a Super Bowl party. The afternoon was going good with absolutely no political conversation. Then son-in-law's Trump-humping parents showed up. They're in their mid-70s, and I'm guessing lifelong Republicans. They operate a fairly large farm growing corn and soybeans. Pop started yucking it up about Musk and all the waste he's finding. Him and his son-in-law traded bullshit stories they probably got off Facebook. Luckily, this shit only lasted about 15 minutes. Now, 6 weeks later, Musk has cut jobs from U.S. aid and slapped tariffs on grain exports. I couldn't be happier than to see these Trump-humping fuckers feel the pain. Now they're all over 115-year-old Chuck Grassley's ass, and they can't do anything about it because he doesn't have the spine left. When shit really hits, really starts to affect the people that cause this, it gives us hope that we can dig out of it. Keep up the good work, Jeff from Southern Iowa. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of moments in time when these people realize that they fucked up. They made the wrong choice. I was talking about this with, I think, Will. I don't honestly wish anybody bad luck. I mean, put it this way, I'm not taking any joy from anybody's suffering, even the Trumplefacts, losing houses, businesses, losing money, whatever happens. I'm not enjoying it personally, but I appreciate it. And this is what I mean. After all we've gone through, after all we've seen, it seems like this is the only way we can get somebody to get a light bulb above their head and understand what the fuck is going on. And if that's what it's going to take, well, then I'm thankful for it, because we need to stop this bullshit. I mean, we've tried to educate these people. We've had elections, we've had investigations, we've had trials, we've had convictions, and none of it was enough for Trump-Lefucks. None of it at all. So apparently, they have to suffer in order to do that. I won't relish in their suffering, but I will be glad when they finally hit that light bulb above their head and they understand what the fuck is going on and how they fucked up and how we need to stop it. All right. Thank you, Jeff. Next one. Hello, Mike. Trump disrespected President Zelensky on arrival when he said, "I see you dressed up for the meeting." Then Brian Glenn of Real America, a far-right news network, and Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend, asked President Zelensky why he didn't wear a suit. Zelensky dresses to show support for his country against Putin. Zelensky said he would wear a new suit when his country was at peace. Why was the press at this meeting anyway? Sam in Georgia. Well, why is that dumb fuck there? The press, I guess it's not unusual for the press to be there. Unfortunately, the question isn't why the press was there. Why wasn't AP and Reuters there? Just a couple of the preeminent news sources in the country. And why was Russia's propaganda arm, TASS news agency, there? That's a good question. Now, Brian Glenn, or whatever the fuck his name is, he's a clown. He's an absolute clown. If you look at him on TV, I saw an interview after the fact, and he was kind of bemoaning the fact that he was getting a lot of negative comments for what he said. He said, "I wasn't trying to be snarky. I understand how they think it's snarky, but that isn't what I was trying to do. Donald Trump mentioned it, so I was just following up." No, fucktard, you were being snarky. You were being snarky. That is the essence of what bullies do. You try to make fun, you try to diminish them, and then you go after them. Unfortunately, if you look at this guy, he's not too smart. He's dating Marjorie Taylor Greene as proof that he's not too smart. And you look at this guy's face and his squinty eyes and the way he talks, and you think, Mom must have been a drinker, because you look like you got fetal alcohol syndrome. This guy, man, he is an absolute piece of shit. There is no question about it. Thank you, Sam. Next one says, "Hi, Boomer. Jackie here from Broke-Ass, Alabama. I listened to a question asked, do you think Trump would help Putin? If he could do that, would that be considered treason? I absolutely believe it would be. I don't think he can get the military to agree to that. I read that the military could arrest Trump if he went too far, and that is true. When Trump go, all of his clown show buddies got to go as well, or I think we would still have a problem. Trump is not smart enough to think of all that shit that he's doing." And you know, you're absolutely right about that. That was a question somebody asked, and any other time I would have said, well, that's a ridiculous question, but it's really something to consider. Donald Trump is all in on Vladimir Putin. Now, Donald Trump would have us believe that Vladimir Putin is just running over the top of Ukraine, and Ukraine doesn't have a chance against Russia. Well, for 3 years, a different story has been told. Russia's not in good shape. Their economy sucks. They've lost 700,000 men. For God's sake, they're bringing in North Korean fighters just to get manpower. They keep talking about how Ukraine is diminished and losing, but that's not the case. It is Vladimir Putin and Russia that is losing this war. I mean, for a war that they said would take 3 days, and it's now been 3 years, and the losses have been insurmountable. Vladimir Putin is pushing Donald Trump to do the things he's doing in order to get this ended and have Vladimir Putin still come out the winner. Vladimir Putin is just like Donald Trump. They don't back down from anything. They'll double down until they get crushed. So now what Vladimir Putin is trying to do is trying to get Donald Trump to essentially get uh, Zelensky to surrender and give Putin whatever he wants. I mean, you look at the deal that they laid out. Donald Trump and America was going to get the mineral rights, and there was no indication that they were going to do anything in return for Zelensky and Ukraine. Well, who's going to sign that deal? You know, it's funny. Prior to Zelensky showing up, Donald Trump was telling everybody, yeah, he's just going to come here and we're going to sign it. It's going to be great for everybody. And I said at that time, I said, you know, I haven't heard much about the deal, but the deal doesn't sound that good. I'd be surprised if he signed it. And of course, Zelensky comes and the famous blow up and all that stuff, and it never got signed. So Zelensky goes away. Donald Trump is losing his shit now because he was supposed to pull this off for Vladimir Putin, and he fucked it up again because that's what Donald Trump does. He fucks things up. And so now he's got to think of something else. He basically told Zelensky, if you don't sign this thing, we're out. He burned that bridge, but he can't be done yet because he's got to finish this for Vladimir Putin. So now he's trying to talk nice and get him back to the table. We just want to end this war. We want to do this and that. And Zelensky said, you know, this was regrettable, but he never apologized, nor should he apologize for the situation. He said, I'd like to get back to the table too, which is probably true. But that doesn't mean that Zelensky is going to take Donald Trump's deal. That said, Donald Trump was out walking around talking about Zelensky's coming back in town and we're going to sign the deal. Donald Trump just wants the win. Vladimir Putin wants to look good. He doesn't want to back down. Donald Trump wants to look good and winning this negotiation because he's a master. Dumbest fucking negotiator I've ever seen. I've done some negotiation in my time, and I'm not the greatest negotiator ever, but I know enough to know the way he goes about it is just absolutely fucking stupid. Watching Donald Trump cut funding to a lot of things, he had a big funding situation where he was going to cut off $2 billion in funding, you know, USAID and some other things as well. Um, and the Democrats said, you know, that's illegal. We're going to take you to court, which they did do. They took him to court, lower court. Then they took him to the appellate court because, of course, Donald Trump appealed it. And then they took it to the Supreme Court. And this is where we were all concerned. Will the Supreme Court side with Donald Trump, even though this is an obvious case and there's no way he should win? A lot of people felt that the Supreme Court would just side with him and he'd get to do whatever he wanted to do. Well, we've got a decision, kind of a decision from the Supreme Court on one of those cases. The Supreme Court, in a 5-4 emergency ruling Wednesday, refused to halt a judge's decision ordering the Trump administration to immediately release nearly $2 billion in foreign aid payments owed under existing contracts. And keep in mind, these are existing contracts and they've been approved by Congress. There's no reason in the world they should be able to stop these. So it's nice that the Supreme Court recognized that. It's a little troubling for something this simple, this basic, that the split was only 5-4. Only 5-4. And the two conservatives were John Robert, the Chief Justice, and Amy Coney Barrett. Now, it's funny about Amy Coney Barrett. We were all concerned about her, and we still are. She comes from a cult, essentially. She's a radical right person, but she seems to have some integrity from time to time. She votes with the Democrats when things are just pretty obvious. And she noted that this situation was pretty obvious, in spite of the fact that Alito and Kavanaugh and some of these other clowns did not. But anyway, it was good that the Supreme Court pushed back. It hands a loss to the administration in the first time that President Trump's efforts to drastically reshape federal spending, agency by agency, have reached the high court. Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Amy Coney Barrett joined the court's 3 liberals to side against the administration. Now, the four conservatives include Justice Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, Neil Gorsuch, and Brett Kavanaugh. They dissented, and I would love to hear their reasons for dissenting, because this is pretty simple law. Signed contract, approved by Congress, it should be paid. I don't know how you try to explain the reasoning for not paying it. Donald Trump certainly can't do that, and you would think Supreme Court justices might explain that, but they didn't do that. They didn't explain anything. They just told us what the vote was and what the outcome was. The dissenters didn't really go into detail why they dissented. And I can tell you why they dissented, because they're Donald Trump suck-ups. That's why. Now, Alito did write something. He says, does a single district court judge who likely lacks jurisdiction have the unchecked power to compel the government of the United States to pay out and probably lose forever $2 billion in taxpayer dollars? The answer to that question should be an emphatic no, but a majority of the court apparently thinks otherwise. I'm stunned, Alito wrote, joined by three others. Okay. I'm sorry. They did write a dissent. I didn't realize that. I'd heard that they didn't go into much detail. And of course, this is a pretty short dissent. You see what they're doing here? They just twist things and they find loopholes and they try to explain things away. But again, I'll remind these judges, this was funding that was approved by Congress. It is Congress's choice to pay this, not the judge that sent it back to Donald Trump. It's not the judge that decided this. Congress decided this. Congress decides on laws and bills. They're lawmakers. So when they make a law, it may come to you and you get to decide whether it's a law in accordance with the Constitution. You don't get to determine what the law should be. You just decide whether it falls under the purview of whatever the law states, the text of it. But Alito and these other dumb fucks want to be in there kissing the ass of Donald Trump and doing whatever he wants. This is one of the more troubling things we have in this country. We have a tainted, corrupt Supreme Court. And without a legitimate Supreme Court, it's hard to have any judicial oversight. Now, the Trump administration has broadly looked to dismantle the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, including by firing employees and freezing its payments to contractors, sparking a wave of lawsuits. Isn't that interesting? Donald Trump is famous for not paying vendors and people he owes money. So now he wants to make the U.S. government just like him. The Supreme Court's emergency decision keeps in place a lower judge's order enforcing his directive that the administration maintain foreign aid agreements that existed before Trump took office. U.S. District Judge Amir Ali, an appointee from former President Biden, has found that the Trump administration wasn't complying with his order to resume the unpaid U.S. aid contracts and grants. Last week, Ali demanded the funds be released by the end of the following day, and then they got the appeal to the Supreme Court, so they got extra time of a week. Now, the question is, the Supreme Court told them they have to pay this thing. So what's going to happen? Are they going to do it? Well, they haven't done it up to this point. And if they don't do it, who's going to make them? That's the question I have here. And I don't know the answer to that. I hope there's some way to compel Donald Trump to do the job that the court have ordered him to do. But we're dealing with an incorrigible child here with Donald Trump, and he may just not do it. He may test the waters to see what will happen. And I'm hoping against hope there is something we can do to actually compel him to do this. Now, when Donald Trump got elected, it was in part because of the far left folks that didn't like the way Joe Biden was handling the Israel-Hamas war and the Gaza Strip situation. They were going to show Joe Biden, old genocide Joe, that they're not going to vote for him. So they got Donald Trump. Whether they voted for him or they just didn't vote, I don't know. But they got what they wanted. And I got to believe that they're not really liking what they ended up with, because it's been tragic. The war the ceasefire really hasn't begun because Hamas hasn't released all of its hostages, and Israel hasn't stopped doing fucked up shit. And I just want to say, whenever I say something against Israel, I have to qualify that and say I'm talking about Netanyahu. The people of Israel are great people. I'm not an anti-Semite. I want them to have peace. They were attacked. They deserved to fight back. But there's something interesting going on with this. When Joe Biden was there, when he was in office, there was humanitarian aid going to the Palestinians. You have to understand, in my mind anyway, Israel isn't fighting the Palestinians, they're fighting Hamas. Hamas is the one that did the attack. Yet Palestinians are struggling and striving to live and being killed. And Benjamin Netanyahu just said the other day or two ago, that they were cutting off all humanitarian aid to the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. So you far left folks, is that what you bought in for? Is that what you voted for? But this is what you got, partially because of how you behaved in this last election. I have to wonder if you'll learn a lesson. I doubt it, but hopefully you do. So President Donald Trump had a remark about it today. Trump on Wednesday issued what he called a last warning to Hamas to release all remaining hostages held in Gaza, directing a sharply worded message after the White House confirmed that he had recently dispatched an envoy for unprecedented direct talks with the militant group. Now, Trump, in a statement on his Truth Social platform, soon after meeting with the White House with 8 former hostages, added that he was sending Israel everything it needs to finish the job. And this is exactly what I told you he would do. You struggled with Joe Biden and the way he was getting things done, but he was basically pulling the reins on Benjamin Netanyahu. He was holding Benjamin Netanyahu back for as much damage as he did. It could have been a lot worse. Joe was also sending humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. Now that aid has ended, and Donald Trump says, I'm going to send Israel everything it needs to finish the job. This is what I told you he'd do. Donald Trump will get angry, something doesn't go his way. I mean, he already made that statement before. If you don't release all the hostages, all hell is going to break loose. Well, they didn't release all the hostages, and Donald Trump didn't do jack shit. But now what I presume he's going to do is, if they don't heed his demand, Donald Trump is going to cut the reins loose on Benjamin Netanyahu, and he can do whatever he wants. And then it's going to get horribly ugly. And people say, aren't you worried about that? And I say, you know what? I can't really worry about it right now. We've got an absolute dumpster fire going on in our country, and we can't help anybody unless we make ourselves better. And as long as Donald Trump is president, we're never going to be able to accomplish that. So Donald Trump said, release all the hostages now, not later, and immediately return all of the dead bodies of the people you murdered, or it's over for you. Only sick and twisted people keep bodies, and you are sick and twisted. The pointed language from Trump came after the White House said Wednesday that the U.S. officials have engaged in ongoing talks and discussions with Hamas officials, stepping away from a long-held U.S. policy of not directly engaging in the militant group. Confirmation of the talks in the Qatari capital, Doha, came as Israel-Hamas ceasefire remains in the balance. It's the first known direct engagement between U.S. and Hamas since the State Department designated the group a foreign terrorist organization. Now, Donald Trump said he would end the war in Ukraine with Russia 24 hours. He hasn't done that. He's not even close. The only solution he comes up with is that Zelensky and Ukraine surrender to Russia. That's not going to happen. He also said that he could end this war with Israel and Hamas. Now, you have to understand, when Donald Trump says he can end something quickly, like the Russian-Ukraine war or the Israeli-Hamas thing, his plan for ending these things is the same for both situations. He wants to go into Ukraine and talk to Zelensky and say, if we're this all powerful country, if you don't just give in to Vladimir Putin, we're going to crush you. That's basically his attitude. And in the situation with Israel and Hamas, doing the same thing. Hamas, you better give this shit up, or I'm going to let Mad Dog Benjamin Netanyahu loose on your shit. That's what he's doing. That's how he thinks he can end these things quickly. Donald Trump is not a mediator. He has sides he's picked, and he wants those sides to win. And that's how he thinks he's going to end these wars so quickly. He believes that people are going to bend and scrape to him and do whatever he wants because they're terrified of him. Turns out that's not the case. Nobody's terrified of Donald Trump. He's become little more than a joke in this world. And people not only laugh at him, but they're now ready to fight against him. And they're not concerned at all because Donald Trump is a fuck up. Now, here's an interesting story. Speaking of fuck ups, more than 5,000 employees who were fired from the U.S. Department of Agriculture are getting their jobs back, at least for now, after a government employee oversight board decided Wednesday that they were illegally terminated. A lot of these people were illegally terminated. The Merit Systems Protection Board, a panel charged with protecting federal merit systems against partisan or political abuse, announced it is broadening its previous decision that restored the jobs of 6 federal employees to all USDA employees who were similarly and haphazardly fired by the Trump administration. All of these federal staffers are probationary employees or people who have generally been in their jobs for a year or less. The decision means thousands of USDA workers who were unlawfully fired can return to their jobs. It also strengthens the case being made by legal groups like Democracy Forward, which brought the request before the board that none of the mass firings being carried out by Trump and Elon Musk's so-called Doge department, none of that has been legal. The Merit System Protection Board has again confirmed that the Trump-Vance administration firing of tens of thousands of hardworking federal employees is unlawful. Sky Perryman, a president and CEO of Democracy Forward, said that in a statement. We are gratified that this unlawful action has been stayed for USDA employees, and we remain committed to ensuring the tens of thousands of other civil servants receive their same reprieve. This is about protecting the people who work for the American people. It's about fairness, stability, and the rule of law. That means protecting the nonpartisan civil service from an administration bent on creating chaos and uncertainty. Now, you would think after going through something like this, Donald Trump and Elon Musk may want to think twice about doing something that stupid again. They keep getting pushback. They keep failing. They keep losing in court. You would think they'd want to stop that. However, the Department of Veterans Affairs is planning a reorganization that includes cutting 80,000 jobs from the sprawling agency that provides health care for retired military members, according to an internal memo obtained by the Associated Press. The VA's chief of staff, Christian Cyrick, told top-level officials at the agency that they had an objective to cut enough employees to return to 2019 staffing levels of just under 400,000. That would require terminating tens of thousands of employees after the VA expanded over the Biden administration, as well as to cover veterans impacted by burn pits under the 2022 PACT Act. The memo instructs top-level staff to prepare for an agency-wide reorganization in August to resize and tailor the workforce to the mission and revised structure. It also calls for agency officials to work with the White House Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, to move out aggressively while taking a pragmatic and disciplined approach to Trump's administration goals. Government executive first reported on the internal memo. Veterans have already been speaking out against the cuts at the VA that so far had included a few thousand employees and hundreds of contracts. More than 25% of the VA's workforce is comprised of veterans. Interesting, isn't it? They keep telling us that they support veterans. Nobody's more important than veterans. Yet they want to fire 80,000 people in Veterans Affairs. Many of them are veterans. When, um, what's her name? Donald Trump's lawyer, the Barbie lawyer, I talked about her in the last podcast. Alina Habba is her name. And she was being interviewed about all these cuts and how many veterans have been fired. She didn't have any sympathy or any empathy about this whole fucking thing. She basically said, well, we've got to cut waste. And, you know, if these people aren't doing their job, if they're not capable of doing their job, I'm sorry if they're veterans, but they're fired. So not only are they saying they're inconsequential, she's also saying they're incompetent. And my question is, how do you know that? You walk in for 2 days and you start cutting people and you start telling them they aren't living up to the standards of the job, but you don't even know the job. And you're constantly firing people, then having to hire them back because of what you're doing. And it's so haphazardly done. I mean, I know the intention is to create chaos, and they are certainly doing that. But Jesus Christ, they're fucking with people's lives. And when you start fucking with the Department of Veteran Affairs, that's when people are going to be starting to hit the streets. A lot of people think that if they're fucking with Social Security or Medicare or Medicaid or even Veterans Affairs, that these are a bunch of elderly folks that are in wheelchairs and on oxygen. They're not going to go on the streets. Well, you have to understand these people have family members, they have kids, they have grandkids, they have siblings. And these people will be made to be responsible to take care of them, and they won't be able to take care of them in a way that they need. So these people are going to be angry, and these people are going to be speaking out. These are the people that are going to go to the streets. I've said before, Social Security may be that red line when people just start going nuts, but I got to be honest, the veterans are in a similar situation. There's a lot of veterans in this country that count on the VA. And if Donald Trump and Elon Musk are trying to destroy it, there's going to be a lot of angry people and a lot of people that aren't getting the services that were promised to them when they decided to give their time to the military. And if they are going to do this to the VA, how are you going to get other people to join the military? One of the main reasons to do it is the benefits. If you take away the benefits or you diminish the benefits, nobody's going to want to fucking work there anymore. These people aren't thinking before they do things. They're absolutely ignorant. And it's unfortunate to see. Now, of course, we had the State of the Union speech, and that was an absolute shit show that went on for fucking ever. It felt like the Jerry Lewis telethon, except not as entertaining. It went almost 100 minutes, 100 minutes for a State of the Union. He spent most of that time talking about shit that had nothing to do with the State of the Union and promoting and hyping himself. That's what he always does. It was no different than a typical rally. But Donald Trump loves the spotlight, loves to hear himself talk, and loves to be cheered like by sycophantic pieces of shit like the Republican Party and the Republican politicians in Congress. We had hoped that the Democrats would push back a little bit, and at first it seemed like they did. There was some booing going on. And then Representative Al Green, a Democrat from Texas, struck a defiant note on the House floor for the second day in a row, stating that he does not regret disrupting President Donald Trump's speech. So what had happened during the speech, he stood up and said, "You do not have a mandate to cut Medicaid." People told him to sit down and be quiet, as Republicans do, and he stood up and he said it again. And then he said it again. And then they got the sergeant of arms to take him out of the room. And now they're talking about censuring him. You know, it's funny. I remember Marjorie Taylor Greene yelling some crazy shit at Joe Biden. I remember a lot of them talking some shit. And nobody did anything to censure them. So is that the Republicans' fault? No, it's not the Republicans' fault. It's not surprising the Republicans would go medieval on the shit and try to punish Al Green. The Democrats could have done that to Marjorie Taylor Greene and the others that have done these sorts of things, but it was them that chose not to take the high road, to not create a kerfuffle. Therein lies the problems with the Democratic Party. They're not fighters, and we're in a fight. That is a problem. We need fighters. And as long as we have the old people, the Schumers, the Pelosi's, even the Hakeem Jeffries, people who just aren't willing to fight, they want to deal with the decorum that is normally expected in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. But the fact of the matter is the Republicans don't follow that. So we just appear weak when we don't push back. That's why we appreciate somebody like Jasmine Crockett or AOC or Ayanna Pressley or any of those folks. Trump delivered a record-long address to a joint session of Congress on Tuesday, but was interrupted early on by Green, who stood and pointed his cane at the president while railing against potential cuts to Medicaid. Speaker Mike Johnson asked the 77-year-old to sit down, but Green refused and was escorted out of the chamber. Now, on Wednesday, House Republicans quickly advanced a resolution to censure Green, who took to the floor to explain his actions. And still I rise to explain why I did what I did, he began, and I did it with intentionality. The president indicated that he had a mandate. I said to the president, you do not have a mandate to cut Medicaid. I have constituents who need Medicaid. They will suffer, and some will die if they don't get Medicaid. See, Al Green was just doing what he was supposed to do. He's supposed to stand behind his constituents. Most Republicans don't understand that because they do whatever the fuck they want to do. Green said he'd heard Johnson's call for him to take the seat, but I did not, and I did not with intentionality. The lawmaker went on to say that he is prepared to face the consequences because I don't believe in the richest country in the world, people should be without good health care. I stood up for my constituents then. I'm standing up for my constituents now. He added, friends, I would do it again. I have to be candid with you. Before Green spoke, Representative Jim McGovern railed against the proceeding, saying the Republicans sprint to the floor to censure Al Green because he hurt Trump's feelings. It is pathetic. And that's absolutely right. What's going on in Congress, what's going on with the Republicans, and what went on in that speech Donald Trump gave, it is absolutely pathetic. I mean, it's almost laughable, the siding with Russia and Vladimir Putin over our ally in Ukraine and President Zelensky. The whole thing is just pathetic. The idea that they want to cut Medicaid, so they compose a bill that doesn't say Medicaid, but leaves no option but to cut Medicaid. They want reasonable deniability. Well, we didn't say we were going to cut Medicaid. No, but you're going to give a directive to a committee, and that's the only thing they can cut. So you're just passing the buck down the line. You fucks are cowards, and you can't say what you mean. You remember the State of the Union that Biden gave. Biden was talking about how they wanted to cut Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, and such, and he got booed. None of them got censored, but they booed because they didn't want Joe Biden saying the quiet thing out loud. And then Joe Biden kind of cornered them and said, well, if you agree that you don't want to cut Medicaid or Social Security or Medicare, that's good. Now we don't have to worry about it. And for that year, they couldn't really do it because Joe Biden put them on the spot. Now, this time around, they don't have Joe Biden. They have dumb fuck Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, in that whole speech, never mentioned Medicaid or Social Security, which is weird because in previous interviews, Donald Trump said he wouldn't touch Medicaid, Medicare, or Social Security. You would have thought he would have brought it up in the State of the Union, but he didn't this time because Donald Trump's a liar and he'll do whatever he's told to do or whatever he thinks is expeditious to his future, his power, and his money. Anyhow, Donald Trump was a little upset about the way the Democrats behaved in the speech. He didn't like the fact that they never stood up for him. He didn't like the fact that they never clapped for him. They sat there stoically, some of them holding signs that no doubt got under Donald Trump's skin. President Trump condemned the total disrespect displayed by Democrats toward him during his joint address to Congress Wednesday, protesting that they didn't even have the common courtesy to stand for a child in the audience who had survived brain cancer. Yeah, that was a nice show you put on, Donnie Trump. Because if you remember right, you remember Donald Trump had a nephew who had a son that had cancer and wasn't doing well. And Donald Trump was so compassionate that he said to his nephew, you know, it'd probably be better off if you just let him die. That's what he said. So to think that he gives a fuck about this child with brain cancer, which is a tragic situation, is ridiculous. I wish the best for the child, and I hope everything goes well for the child. But I'm angry at Donald Trump for using this child as a fucking prop, because that's what he did. Donald Trump went on to say the Democrats should lose the midterms based on their behavior at last night's joint address to Congress. Well, fortunately, that's not the way it goes, Donnie. Trump, in a post to Truth Social, said all Americans must use their behavior on men and women's sports, their very dangerous open border policy, high energy and taxes, and much else. He continued, also, Republicans should utilize the footage provided on the total disrespect they showed to all of those that were honored that night, including young ladies who were killed by illegal immigrants, people with terminal cancer, etc. Well, maybe we should also have brought those women that were sexually assaulted by you and others in the Republican Party. We should have some sympathy for them. But you know what? You wouldn't show sympathy. You would do what you always do. You'd say, they're liars. Everybody else in the world is a liar, but not Donald Trump, not the Republicans. He said they didn't even have the common courtesy to stand, smile, or applaud. This could be, on analyzing the full tape of this history event, your full campaign to victory. This is how arrogant he is. He thinks you can show that video with people that have some self-respect, that don't clap for him, that it's going to hurt them in the election. No, Donnie, they're going to show video from your State of the Union. That's going to affect you. That's going to hurt you. Maybe 70% of this country is tired of what you've got going on here. Your polling is dropping like a fucking rock. The economy sucks because of what you've done, not because of what Joe Biden's done, but because of what you've done. Donald Trump, if anybody's sunk the midterm election, it's you. And you just got started. Trump concluded, in other words, Republicans can take what happened last night and win any race in the country. Good luck. No, Donnie, you say a lot of things, but none of them come true because it's just bullshit. You just lie. Now, during his speech, House and Senate Democrats protested Trump with signs and refused to stand up or applaud throughout. Democrats in the audience received criticism from Republicans for refusing to stand, even for honored guests, including the 22-year-old murder victim Laken Riley and a 13-year-old brain cancer survivor who was made an honorary member of the Secret Service. Well, Donnie, I would ask you, are you going to allow this child to have Medicaid to pay for these expensive surgeries regarding his brain cancer? Because based on what you're doing right now, it would take the money from a child like that. You want to show him as a prop. You want to make it look like you're compassionate, but you'll take the money from his health care. That's what you did. That's what you're doing. That's the kind of piece of shit you are. We'll wrap things up with this. Wednesday House hearing, as House Oversight Chairman James Comer got into a shouting match with Representative Ayanna Pressley and threatened to have her removed from the proceeding. Pressley attempted to enter articles into the official record showing U.S.-born Americans committing sexual assault and murder at a higher level than illegal immigrants. She was seeking unanimous consent, which Comer would not give her after she began reading from the articles. The hearing brought out a number of mayors to answer questions on sanctuary laws and the city's handling of illegal migrants. No, Comer repeatedly said as he hit the gavel as Pressley tried reading through the highlights from the articles. The chairman accused Presley of trying to get kicked out of the hearing to get on MSNBC. This trend of all of you trying to get thrown out of committee so you can get on MSNBC is going to end. We're not going to put up with it, Coomer said. That's my procedural right as a member of this committee to enter documents into the record. You do not get to dictate how I recite the articles for the record. I have been very accommodating to you, Comer told her as Presley continued. I take particular umbrage as a survivor of sexual violence. I will enter into the record. This is my right. Thank you, she said. No, you know the process of unanimous consent. You are not recognized, Comer said as he moved on to the next speaker. Yeah, these dumb fucks don't want to hear the negative stuff. They're all about free speech until you have some free speech that goes against them, which is most of the time. These people, whether it be Donald Trump all the way down to James Comer, they all have fascist tendencies. And this is something we need to stop. We need to crush in any way we can possibly do it. It's appalling what's going on in Congress and in the Supreme Court and in the DOJ and all this bullshit. It's getting very tiring, and some things have to change. Some things have to stop. I wish I knew what it was, but we have people in Congress that should know, and we need them to act accordingly. All right, we are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. I hope you have a great day, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.